These images conceal memories. Beneath Hollywood's familiar stories lies a hidden history of persecution and murder which haunted a small group of men, not American cowboys, but Jewish immigrants. This is the story of the founders of Hollywood, the story of the idea that became their America and ours. First saw light on a Hollywood screen. It was largely the product of 6 movie studios established in the 1920s and run for over 30 years by a group of Jewish immigrants. They had strikingly similar backgrounds.
All races and religions, that's America to me.
All of these men who founded Hollywood were born within a 500-mile radius of one another. And all of them wound up roughly within 15 miles of one another in Los Angeles. One could say that the American dream was really born in Eastern Europe.
Here we are. This is the Warner Studio.
Gee, I've never been so thrilled in all my life.
Harry Warner, who with 3 of his brothers brought sound to the motion picture, was born in Poland.
Comes Jack Warner, youngest of the Warner clan, and then the senior member of the film-famed brothers.
Also from Poland was Samuel Goldwyn, born Goldfish. Although Goldwyn never ran a major studio, he was perhaps the biggest and best known of the independent Hollywood producers. Universal founder Carl Laemmle came from a small town in Germany. Louis B. Mayer, who gave us the glory years of the MGM studio, was born in a Russian Jewish village. William Fox and Paramount's Adolf Zucker were both born in Hungary. Fox's studio merged with 20th Century Pictures to form 20th Century Fox.
Here comes Adolf Zucker, the president of Paramount Pictures.
Zucker, known as the father of the feature-length film, spent his childhood in this Jewish village. Prior to the 20th century, most Eastern European Jews were forced to live in poor villages called shtetls. Without a homeland, they lived a marginal existence at the sufferance of the Russian Tsar.
Rabbi, may I ask you a question?
Certainly, Leibish.
Is there a proper blessing for the Tsar?
A blessing for the Tsar, of course. May God bless and keep the Tsar far away from us.
In these villages, religion and life were intertwined. Everyone spoke Yiddish, the Germanic language of the shtetl. These towns were alive with Yiddish songs, storytelling, theater, and humor that would eventually find their way to America. This rich cultural life insulated the shtetl Jews from their misery and the often hostile reality around them.
The Hollywood movie moguls and their parents came from a place which was like a colossal pressure cooker. The Pale of Settlement in the Russian Empire was the only place where Jews could live legally under the Tsar. They had a very marginal existence, lived in poor villages. There was a tremendous degree of overpopulation. People were constantly migrating around this area. It really was the equivalent of a sort of huge Indian reservation. Not only were people poor, but there were very few things that they could do to earn a livelihood. Their neighbors were often violent. There were tremendous constraints on Jewish life and also a real sense of vulnerability.
Without warning, death could come crashing down on the defenseless shtetls, reminding the Jews that as a people they were permanent outsiders, vulnerable and powerless. Before the turn of the century, hundreds of thousands died in pogroms, massacres of Jews.
Suddenly, neighbors kept running out of the front of their house yelling, "The hooligans, hooligans, the hooligans are here." Cossacks. They broke down the gate and they came in on horseback, on foot, wielding swords. And my oldest brother and my father each grabbed one of those clubs and they went out swinging. Fortunately, they came back, but there were a few people killed. This was the pogrom, and I lived through it.
This is where the founders of Hollywood came from. This is what they were fleeing and why they came to America. These harrowing experiences are reflected in many Hollywood films. Again and again, images of the rampaging oppressor, of the slaughter of the innocent, and of homes laid waste by fire make their way into American movies. For the shtetl Jews in the late 1800s, life was a series of rapes and murders. Many decided not to wait for a cavalry that would never come.
For the Jews of Eastern Europe, there were three ways to flee. The first was to stay where you were and participate in some Marxist or socialist movement where you could become part of a labor organization that would in turn create a great regime, a socialist regime in which Jews could be accepted as equals. A very small minority began to dream about Palestine. Very small numbers of people became Zionists. You needed a great deal of ideological dexterity to talk yourself into getting on a boat and going to Palestine.